Kethra had worked on sensor duty for 20 years. She had seen asteroid storms, rogue planets, and the burning death of stars. Nothing surprised her anymore. Or so she thought. The Veth Nebula filled half her screen. It was a wall of purple and red clouds that stretched across 1,000 light years. Radiation storms moved inside it like angry ghosts. Gravity wells appeared and disappeared without warning. Every probe sent into that nebula had been crushed, burned, or simply lost forever. No ship had ever crossed it. No species had ever tried more than once. That was why the Dominion had placed the patrol cruiser Eternal Vigilance here. Not to guard against invasion. Nothing could come through the Veth Nebula. The ship was here to watch for natural disasters that might spill out from the clouds. It was boring work. Safe work. Until now. Kethra's four hands moved across her controls. She blinked her large eyes twice, then 3 times. The reading on her screen made no sense. Something was moving inside the nebula. Something was coming out. She ran a diagnostic check. The sensors were working perfectly. She ran another check. Same result. A third check. The reading stayed the same. There was a ship emerging from the Veth Nebula. "Commander," she said. Her voice was calm, but her hearts were beating fast. "You need to see this." Fleet Commander Varth walked over from his command chair. He was old for a Lorthi, with gray skin and scars from the Unification Wars. He had commanded this ship for 15 years, and had never once needed to draw his weapons. The Veth Nebula was the perfect border. Nothing could cross it. He looked at Kethra's screen. For a long moment, he said nothing. "That is impossible," he finally said. "Yes, Commander, but it is there." The ship on the screen was small. Very small. Dominion cargo vessels were bigger. Dominion fighters were bigger. This thing was barely larger than a shuttle. It had no elegant curves, no beautiful design. It looked rough, angular, almost ugly, like someone had built it in a hurry and had not cared about how it looked. But none of that mattered. What mattered was its speed. Varth had seen fast ships before. The Void Dancers could jump across star systems in seconds. The ancient vessels of the architects, preserved in museums, could bend space itself. But this small, ugly ship was not jumping. It was not bending space. It was simply moving through normal space at a speed that should have been impossible. "Query the Imperial database," Varth ordered. "Find out what that ship is." Kethra's hands flew across her controls. The Imperial database was the greatest collection of knowledge in the galaxy. It contained information on every known species, every type of ship, every piece of technology discovered in 10,000 years of Dominion history. If something existed, the database knew about it. The response came back in seconds. "No match found." Varth felt cold. In his entire career, he had never seen those words. Everything had a match. Everything was known. The Dominion had mapped the galaxy. They had cataloged every civilization, every threat, every possibility. "Check for a transponder signal," he said. "None, Commander." "Energy signature?" "Unknown type. The computer cannot identify it." "Point of origin?" Kethra looked up at him. Her eyes were wide with something he had not seen in her before. Fear. "The Veth Nebula, Commander." It came through the Veth Nebula. The bridge fell silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing. They all understood what that meant. The Veth Nebula was death. It had killed millions. Entire fleets had been lost trying to find a path through it. And yet this small, ugly ship had done what no one else could do. "Where is it going?" Varth asked. Kethra plotted the trajectory. Her hands were shaking now. "It is heading for the core systems, Commander. It is heading for Keth Prime." Keth Prime, the homeworld, the seat of the High Arbiter, the heart of the Dominion Empire, Vorath made a decision. He walked back to his command chair and pressed a button that had not been used in 40 years. A signal went out across the sector, then across the region, then across the entire empire. Every ship, every station, every military base received the same message. Contact protocol unknown. It was the highest alert possible. It meant that something had been found that the Dominion did not understand. Something that could be a threat. Something that needed to be watched, tracked, and if necessary, destroyed. Within minutes, responses came flooding back. Other patrol ships reported that they too had detected the unknown vessel. Tracking stations across 3 star systems were locking onto its signal. The military command on Keth Prime was waking up, demanding information that Vorath did not have. He stood at the main viewing window and watched the sensor display. The small ship was still accelerating. It was getting faster. His fastest ships could not hope to catch it. His weapons could not lock onto something moving at that speed. "Commander," Kethra said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "It is not slowing down. It just increased speed again." Vorath watched the numbers climb on the display. Each new reading was faster than the last. The ship was not struggling. It was not straining. It seemed almost casual, like a creature that had been holding back and was now finally stretching its legs. "What are you?" Vorath muttered to himself. The unknown vessel did not answer. It simply kept moving, a tiny dot of impossible speed cutting through the darkness, heading toward the heart of an empire that had thought it knew everything. Behind it, the Veth Nebula churned and glowed. The wall that had protected the Dominion for 10,000 years had been broken. And Commander Vorath, who had seen war and peace and everything in between, felt something he had not felt since he was a young soldier facing his first battle. He felt afraid. The hunt was about to begin. But standing there on his bridge, watching that impossible ship fly toward his homeworld, Vorath was not sure who was the hunter and who was the prey. The Dominion responded with everything it had. 12 interceptor squadrons launched from stations across 3 star systems. These were the best pilots in the Empire, flying the fastest ships ever built. The Void Dancers could jump short distances through space itself, appearing ahead of any target in seconds. No enemy had ever escaped them. Admiral Kethvin commanded the operation from his flagship, the Hammer of Justice. He had destroyed pirate fleets. He had ended rebellions. He had never failed to catch a target. "Position Squadron 3 ahead of the vessel's current trajectory," he ordered. "Squadrons 5 and 7, flank from below. We will trap it in a net it cannot escape." His officers followed the orders perfectly. On the tactical display, his ships appeared exactly where they should be. The trap was set. The unknown vessel was flying straight into it. Then it turned. The small ship changed direction so fast that the sensors could barely track it. One moment it was heading north. The next moment it was heading east. It had turned at an angle that should have torn any ship apart. The forces involved should have crushed anything inside the paste. But the ship kept moving. It flew past Squadron 3 before they could react. It slipped between Squadrons 5 and 7 like water through fingers. And then it accelerated again, leaving the Void Dancers behind like they were standing still. Admiral Kethvin stared at his display. His ships were the fastest in the galaxy. They could jump through space. And they could not catch this small, ugly vessel that was simply flying in a straight line. "Again," he ordered. "Reposition all squadrons. Predict its new trajectory." They tried again. And again. And again. Each time, the unknown vessel escaped. It turned at impossible angles. It accelerated when it should have been slowing down. It moved in ways that broke every law of physics that the Dominion understood. On the bridge of a small interceptor, Lieutenant Servan was getting closer than anyone else. He was young and reckless, and he pushed his ship harder than the safety limits allowed. His engines screamed. His hull groaned. But he was gaining on the target. "Just a little more," he muttered. "Just let me see you." He activated his visual scanners and pointed them at the unknown vessel. For a few seconds, he had a clear view of it. What he saw confused him. The ship was not beautiful. Lorathi vessels were works of art, with flowing lines and perfect curves. This thing looked like it had been built in a factory, quickly and without care. It was covered in plates of metal that did not match. There were patches and repairs visible on its hull. It looked old and beaten and worn, but painted on its side, in large letters of a language he did not know, was a single word: Pathfinder. "Command," Servan reported. "I am a visual. The vessel appears to be primitive, rough construction, heavy armor plating. There is writing on the hull. One word. I am transmitting the image now." Before he could say more, the unknown vessel did something new. It did not just turn. It flipped completely around, flew backward for 3 seconds while maintaining its speed, and then flipped again and shot off in a different direction. Servan's ship could not handle the same maneuver. He tried to follow and nearly lost control. By the time he stabilized, the target was gone. Far away on Keth Prime, the War Council had gathered. High Arbiter Thyssen sat at the head of a long table. He was the ruler of the Dominion, the voice of 10,000 years of civilization. Around him sat his admirals, his generals, his advisors. They were all watching the reports come in from the chase. They were all confused. "How is this possible?" One admiral demanded. "No ship can move like that. The crew would be dead from the acceleration alone." "Perhaps there is no crew," another suggested. "Perhaps it is a drone." "A weapon? A weapon from whom?" "The database has no match for this technology." High Arbiter Thyssen raised his hand. The room fell silent. "We are asking the wrong questions," he said. "We should not ask how this is possible. We should ask who built this ship and why they have sent it here." An old voice spoke from the corner of the room. Keeper Mithun was the oldest person present. He had spent his entire life studying the ancient texts, the records from before the Dominion existed. Most people thought he was a fool who wasted his time on fairy tales. "I may have an answer," he said, "though you will not like it." He stood slowly and walked to the center of the room. In his hands, he held an old book, its pages yellow with age. "This text is from before our empire was born," he said. "It speaks of a species that lived on the edge of the galaxy. A species from what the ancients called a death world. A planet so dangerous that nothing should have survived there. And yet, they did. What species?" Thyssen asked. "They had no name in our records. The text only describes them. They were soft, weak. They lived very short lives. But they refused to accept their limits. Where other species evolved to match their environment, this species changed their environment to match themselves. They built tools. They built machines. They built ships that could survive anything because they expected everything to try to kill them." Admiral Keththam laughed. "A fairy tale. A species that weak would have been conquered or destroyed long ago." "Perhaps," Keeper Mithun said. "Or perhaps they went somewhere we never looked. Somewhere we never could look." He pointed toward the display showing the Veth Nebula. "Perhaps they have been on the other side all along." The room erupted in arguments. Some said it was nonsense. Others demanded more information. High Arbiter Thyssen simply sat and watched the display. Where the unknown vessel was still flying toward his homeworld. Then the arguments stopped. Because the unknown vessel had stopped too. It hung in space at the edge of the Keth system. Not moving, not running. Just waiting. And then every communication device in the system received the same message. The voice was strange, different from anything they had heard before. But the words were clear, spoken in perfect Lorthy. "We come in peace. We only want to talk." High Arbiter Thiessen stood. His hearts were beating fast. In 10,000 years, no unknown species had ever reached this far into Dominion space. No one had ever spoken those words to a High Arbiter until now. "Prepare a diplomatic shuttle," he ordered. "It seems we have guests." Ambassador HFY had been trained for this moment her entire life. She had studied 700 languages. She had learned the customs of 4,000 cultures. She had negotiated treaties with species that breathed poison and species that lived in the hearts of stars. Nothing could surprise her, or so she believed. The diplomatic shuttle approached the unknown vessel slowly. Around them, 100 Dominion warships held position, their weapons ready. If anything went wrong, they would destroy the small ship in seconds. But HFY was not thinking about weapons. She was thinking about the message that had been broadcast. The words had been perfect Lorathi, spoken without accent or error. Someone on that ship understood her people. Someone had taken the time to learn. That was either very good or very bad. The shuttle docked with the unknown vessel. The airlock opened. HFY stepped through, followed by 2 guards. She was ready for anything. Monsters, machines, weapons pointed at her face. What she found was much stranger. The corridor inside the ship was plain and simple. The walls were metal, covered with pipes and wires that were completely visible. Nothing was hidden or decorated. Everything was built for function, not beauty. It looked like the inside of a factory. A door opened ahead of her. A figure stepped through. HFY stopped walking. Her guards raised their weapons. She waved them down. The creature before her was small, much smaller than a Lorathi. It stood on 2 legs and had only 2 arms. Its skin was soft and pale, with no scales or armor of any kind. Its eyes were small, its ears were tiny, and it had strange fur growing from the top of its head. That should have been the weakest thing she had ever seen. A child could have knocked it down. A single blow would have broken its bones, but its eyes told a different story. They were old eyes. Tired eyes. Eyes that had seen terrible things and had not looked away. "Welcome aboard the Pathfinder," the creature said. "I am Captain Elena Vasquez. Thank you for coming." The voice was female. The translator in HFY's ear turned the strange sounds into perfect Lorathi, but she could hear the original language underneath. It was harsh and rough, full of hard sounds that did not flow together. "I am Ambassador HFY of the Dominion Empire," she replied. "You have entered our space without permission. You have ignored our borders. Explain yourself." Captain Vasquez smiled. It was a strange expression. The creature pulled back its lips to show its teeth, but there was no threat in it, just warmth. "Fair enough," Vasquez said. "Come with me. This will take some explaining." She led them deeper into the ship. HFY saw more of the creatures along the way. They were all similar, with small differences in size and coloring. They moved quickly, always busy, always doing something. None of them seemed afraid of the Lorathi visitors. They reached a room with a large table and many chairs. On the walls were maps, images, data displays. Vasquez sat down and gestured for HFY to do the same. 300 years ago, Vasquez began, my species discovered how to travel faster than light. We were so excited. We thought we would find the galaxy empty, waiting for us to explore. Instead, we found you. She pressed a button. A map appeared on the wall. It showed the galaxy, divided into colored sections. The Dominion Empire, the Veth Collective, the Krull Hegemony, a dozen other nations and federations. Every direction we tried to expand, we found borders, warnings, threats. No one wanted to share. No one wanted to let us in. HFY nodded. This was normal. Space was limited. Resources were precious. New species were always threats until proven otherwise. So we looked for another way, Vasquez continued. We looked for places no one else would go. The map changed. It now showed the Veth Nebula, the charnel expanse, the hollow stars, regions marked in black on every Dominion chart. Death zones. Places where ships went and never came back. We went through them, Vasquez said. All of them. Yethkai felt her blood turn cold. That is impossible. The Veth Nebula alone has killed millions. No ship can survive those conditions. Many of our ships did not survive, Vasquez admitted. We lost crews. We lost friends. We lost family. Her voice was heavy with old pain. But we learned. Every failure taught us something. Every death made us better. We built our ships to break and be repaired. We trained our crews to expect disaster. We did not try to avoid danger. We learned to survive it. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. My species does not live very long, she said. Less than 100 years for most of us. We do not have time to wait for safe paths to open. We do not have time to develop perfect technology. We only have time to try, to fail, and to try again. Yethkai understood now. This species was not advanced. They were not powerful. They were desperate. They had been pushed into the corners of the galaxy and had survived by being too stubborn to die. Why are you here? She asked. If you have found safe paths through the death zones, why not simply stay hidden? Why reveal yourselves now? Vasquez turned to face her. The warmth was gone from her eyes. Now there was only worry. Because something is coming, she said. Something from outside the galaxy. Something that makes the Veth Nebula look like a calm pond. We have been watching it for 50 years. It is getting closer. She pressed another button. The display changed again. Yethkai saw darkness. Empty space beyond the edge of the galaxy. And moving through that darkness, something vast. Something that swallowed the light of distant stars. Something that should not exist. We call it the Devourer, Vasquez said. We do not know what it is. We do not know where it came from. We only know that it is heading this way. And when it arrives, it will not care about borders or empires or treaties. It will consume everything. Yethkai stared at the image. Her mind refused to accept what she was seeing. It was too big, too terrible, too impossible. Why tell us? She whispered. Captain Vasquez sat down again. She looked tired and sad and very, very old. Because we cannot fight it alone, she said. No one can. We came here because you needed to know. We came here because maybe, if we work together, we might have a chance. She reached across the table and placed her small, soft hand on Yethkai's arm. We come in peace, she said again. But peace is not why we are here. We are here because war is coming. The only question is whether we will face it together or die alone. Yethkai looked at this strange, weak, impossible creature. A species that lived less than a century. A species that had crossed death itself to deliver a warning to strangers. She did not know whether to be grateful or terrified. Perhaps both. The War Council chamber had never been so loud. Ambassador Yethkai stood before the assembled leaders of the Dominion Empire. She had just finished her report. She had told them everything. The humans, their impossible journey through the death zones, their warning about the Devourer. Now the room was filled with shouting voices. This is a trick. Admiral Kethvin slammed his fist on the table. These humans are liars. They want us to lower our defenses so they can attack. How do we know this Devourer even exists? Another general demanded. We have never seen it. Our sensors have never detected it. Because your sensors were never designed to look outside the galaxy, HFY replied calmly. Why would they be? No one ever thought anything was out there. High Arbiter Thiessen raised his hand. The room fell silent. Bring the human captain here, he ordered. Let her present her evidence directly. An hour later, Captain Elena Vasquez stood where HFY had stood. She looked small and fragile in that room full of warriors. But she did not look afraid. For 50 years, she began, my people have maintained observation posts in the void between galaxies. We built them there because we wanted to see what was coming. We wanted to know if we were alone. She activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air above the table. Stars. Empty space. And then something that blocked out the stars behind it. This was taken 30 years ago, Vasquez said. The entity was still far away. We thought we had time. The image changed. The dark shape was bigger now, closer, 20 years ago. Another change. Bigger still. Details were visible now. The thing had structure. It was not a cloud or a natural phenomenon. It had been built. Or perhaps it had grown 10 years ago. The admirals and generals leaned forward. The shape filled most of the image now. It was massive beyond understanding. Planets could have hidden inside it. Stars could have fit in its shadow. 5 years ago. The room was silent. The shape had edges now. Surfaces. Things that might have been engines or weapons or mouths. It was still coming. It had never stopped. It consumed stars, Vasquez said quietly. We have watched it do this twice. It approaches a star, surrounds it, and then the star goes dark. We do not know if it is eating the energy or destroying the matter or something else entirely. We only know that when it is finished, nothing remains. High Arbiter Thiessen spoke slowly. How long until it reaches our galaxy? At its current speed, between 50 and 100 years. But it has been accelerating. The true number could be much smaller. The room erupted again. Some officers demanded immediate military action. Others wanted to flee. A few sat in shocked silence, unable to process what they had heard. Old Keeper Methan rose from his seat. His voice cut through the chaos like a knife. I have found more records, he said. Ancient texts from before the Dominion. They speak of this devourer. They call it by different names, but the descriptions are the same. A darkness that comes from outside. A hunger that cannot be satisfied. He walked slowly to the center of the room. The texts say that this entity has come before. It came in the time of the architects, the civilization that existed before us. They were more advanced than we are. They had technologies we cannot even imagine. And they fell. Every world, every station, every ship, gone. The devourer consumed them all. Then what hope do we have? Admiral Kethvin asked. His voice had lost its anger. Now he just sounded tired. Vasquez answered. The architects faced the devourer alone. They did not share their knowledge. They did not ask for help. They thought they were strong enough to win by themselves. She looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. We are not making that mistake. That is why we are here. Not to trick you. Not to attack you. But to ask you to join us. To fight together. To share what we know. High Arbiter Thiessen stood. He was old, but in that moment he looked older than ever. You ask us to trust you, he said. But you are strangers, unknown. You cross the death zones. You move faster than our fastest ships. How do we know you are not the greater threat? Vasquez smiled sadly. You do not know. You cannot know. Trust is always a risk. But I can offer you something better than trust. What? Proof. Come with me. Let me take you to the edge of the galaxy. Let me show you what we have seen. After that, you can decide whether to believe us." The War Council argued for another hour. Some said it was a trap. Others said they had to know the truth. Finally, High Arbiter Thiessen made his decision. "I will go," he said. "I will see this devourer with my own eyes. If the human is lying, I will know. And if she is telling the truth—" He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. 3 days later, the Pathfinder left Dominion space. On board was Captain Vasquez, her crew, and High Arbiter Thiessen with a small group of advisors. They flew back through the Veth Nebula, following paths that no Dominion ship could have survived. Thiessen watched the storms rage outside the windows and wondered how these fragile humans had learned to navigate such chaos. They emerged on the other side and kept going, past the last stars of the galaxy, past the last planets, into the void. And then they stopped. Thiessen stood at the observation window. Before him was emptiness. Behind him, the galaxy hung like a spiral of light in the darkness. "Where is it?" he asked. Vasquez pointed. "There, look closely." He looked. At first he saw nothing, just empty space. But then his eyes adjusted. He saw the stars in the distance. And he saw the space where there were no stars. A shape of pure darkness, blocking out everything behind it. It was far away. Impossibly far. But it was also impossibly big. Even at this distance, it covered a portion of the sky that made his mind hurt to consider. "How large is that thing?" he whispered. "We are not entirely sure," Vasquez admitted. "At least the size of a star system. Perhaps larger. It is hard to measure something that eats light." Thiessen watched the darkness. It did not move. It did not need to move. It had all the time in the universe. It would come when it was ready. And when it arrived, it would not negotiate. It would not talk. It would simply consume. He thought about his empire. 10,000 years of history. Trillions of lives. Everything his people had built. Everything they had achieved. In the face of that darkness, it all seemed very small. "What do you want from us?" he asked. Vasquez stood beside him. Her reflection in the window looked tired but determined. "Everything," she said. "We want your scientists to work with ours. We want your shipyards to build new designs. We want your soldiers to train alongside our soldiers. We want to share everything we know, and we want you to share everything you know. No secrets. No borders. One fight, and if we refuse, then you will face the devourer alone, just like the architects did. And you will die alone, just like they did." Thiessen looked at the darkness one more time. Then he turned away. "Take me home," he said. "I have work to do." The Pathfinder turned and flew back toward the galaxy. Behind them, the devourer continued its slow journey. It did not care about the small ships or the small creatures inside them. It did not care about empires or treaties or hope. It only knew hunger, and it was patient. 6 months changed everything. When High Arbiter Thiessen returned from the void, he did not sleep for 3 days. He called emergency sessions of the War Council. He sent messages to every colony, every station, every ship in the Dominion fleet. He told them what he had seen. He showed them the images. And then he made an announcement that shocked the entire empire. The borders were opening. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Dominion was inviting outsiders in. Not to conquer, not to study, but to learn from. Human engineers arrived at the great shipyards of Keth Prime. They were small and soft and spoke in rough voices through translation devices. The Larthi workers stared at them with confusion and suspicion. These creatures could barely lift their own tools. Their hands had no claws. Their bodies had no armor. What could they possibly teach the greatest builders in the galaxy? Then the humans started working. They looked at the beautiful Dominion ships and asked strange questions. Why is this system hidden behind a wall? What happens if this part breaks during battle? How long does it take to repair that component? The Lorothy did not understand. Their ships were designed to be perfect. They were not supposed to break. Every system was protected by layers of backup systems. Nothing could go wrong. Everything can go wrong, a human engineer named Torres explained. He was missing 2 fingers on his left hand. Lost them in an accident, he said, when a ship broke in a way no one had predicted. Everything breaks eventually. The question is not how to prevent failure. The question is how to keep going after failure happens. He showed them the human ships. They were ugly and rough, but every part could be reached easily. Every system could be replaced quickly. If something broke, a human crew could fix it in minutes while the ship was still moving, still fighting. They did not try to build perfect ships. They built ships that could survive being imperfect. Thought it was a completely different way of thinking. And slowly, the Lorothy began to understand. The military training was even harder. Dominion soldiers were the finest in the galaxy. They trained for years. They studied tactics written by generals who had been dead for centuries. They followed rules and protocols that had been proven effective in 1,000 battles. Human soldiers did not follow rules. They broke rules. They made up new rules in the middle of fights. They practiced chaos. General Ethko watched a training exercise with growing frustration. His soldiers were trying to capture a building defended by a small human team. His soldiers had better weapons, better armor, better numbers. They should have won easily. They lost. Badly. The humans had done things that made no sense. They had retreated when they should have held. They had attacked when they should have defended. They had set traps in places where no reasonable person would expect traps. They had fought dirty and unfair and without honor. This is not proper combat, Ithacal complained. The human commander, a woman named Chun, just shrugged. The Devourer will not fight properly. It will not follow your rules. It will not give you time to prepare or recover. It will hit you with everything it has, and it will not stop. Ever. She pointed at the scoreboard, showing the training results. Your soldiers are very good at fighting the enemies you have faced before. But they have never faced something that does not care about their training or their traditions. We have spent 300 years fighting the universe itself. We have learned that the only rule is survival. It was not easy. There were arguments and fights and moments when the alliance nearly fell apart. Lorothy officers were insulted by human methods. Human crews were frustrated by Lorothy bureaucracy. 2 cultures that had never met were trying to become one fighting force. And they did not always succeed, but they kept trying, because at night, when the arguments stopped and the training ended, everyone looked up at the stars. And everyone knew what was coming. Captain Elena Vasquez became the human liaison to the Joint Defense Command. She spent her days in meetings, translating not just words, but ideas. She explained why humans took risks that seemed insane. She helped Lorothy leaders understand that short lives did not mean short thinking. She built bridges between 2 species that had every reason to mistrust each other. One evening, High Arbiter Thiessen invited her to his private quarters. It was a great honor. Few outsiders had ever seen the personal rooms of a High Arbiter. The room was simple. A desk, a window, a few objects that looked old and precious. Thiessen sat in a chair that seemed too big for his tired body. I have been thinking, he said, about your species, about mine, about the differences between us. Vasquez sat across from him. And what have you concluded? My people built an empire on stability, on order, on knowing everything and planning for everything. On knowing everything. We believed that if we were careful enough, if we were wise enough, we would never face a threat we could not handle. He looked out the window at the stars. We were wrong. We built walls instead of bridges. We stopped exploring because we thought we had found everything worth finding. We became comfortable, safe, slow. He turned to face her. Your people are not comfortable. You are not safe. You live short lives in a dangerous universe, and you have never stopped pushing forward. That is why you survived the death zones. That is why you found us. That is why you might be the key to defeating the Devourer. Vasquez shook her head. We are not special. We are just stubborn. We refuse to give up even when we should. Sometimes that kills us. Sometimes it saves us. We never know which until we try. That is exactly what makes you special, Thiessen said. My people need to learn that lesson. We need to remember how to try, how to fail, how to get up again. We have forgotten. He stood and walked to his window. Outside, human and Larathi ships flew side by side, practicing maneuvers that would have been impossible 6 months ago. You have given us something precious, he said. Not just a warning, not just an alliance. You have given us a reason to change, a reason to become better. Vasquez joined him at the window. The ships moved in perfect formation, two species learning to fight as one. When I was young, she said, my grandmother told me a phrase from our old languages. Ad astra per aspera. It means, to the stars, through hardship. We put those words on our first ships that left our home planet. We have carried them with us ever since. Thiessen repeated the words slowly. They felt strange in his mouth, but right in his heart. To the stars, through hardship, he said. Perhaps those words belong to both our peoples now. A month later, a new broadcast went out across the Dominion. It showed the Veth Nebula, once a wall, now a highway. It showed human and Larathi ships flying together through storms that had killed millions. It showed soldiers of both species training side by side, learning from each other, becoming stronger together. And at the end, a simple message in both languages. The darkness is coming, but we will face it together. We will not hide. We will not run. We will fight. To the stars, through hardship, somewhere in the void between galaxies. The Devourer continued its slow approach. It had consumed civilizations before. It had ended empires. It did not know fear or doubt or mercy. But for the first time in millions of years, something was different. Something was waiting for it. Two species that had been strangers were now standing together, building weapons and ships and strategies that had never existed before. They might still fail. They might still die. The Devourer was vast and ancient and terrible, but they would not die alone. They would not die without trying, and they would not die quietly. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Pathfinder. Looking at the stars she had spent her life exploring. Behind her, a fleet of human and Larathi ships prepared for the greatest battle in history. She smiled. This was what humans did. They faced the impossible. They fought the unbeatable. They stood in the darkness and refused to look away. And sometimes, against all odds, they won. The stars burned cold and distant. The Devourer crawled closer with every passing day. But in the space between galaxies, hope had been born. Hope and a stubborn refusal to die. That would have to be enough.